Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. Vice President-elect Mike Pence starts off our broadcast this morning. Welcome, Mr. Vice President-elect.
Thank you, John.
5 days from now, you will be the Vice President. Let's start with some news. The Republican chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee has decided to investigate Russian meddling in the election. That includes any possible contacts between the Russians trying to meddle and the Trump campaign. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think the President-elect and I both welcome the Congress doing its oversight work in this and any other area, and we look forward to the results of their inquiry. But make no mistake about it, I think they'll find what the publicly released intelligence report showed before is that there's no evidence of any impact on voting machines. Donald Trump won this election fair and square, 30 out of 50 states, more counties than any Republican candidate since Ronald Reagan. And so while we certainly respect the right of the Congress to provide oversight, to make inquiries where they deem them appropriate. The American people spoke in this election, and the peaceful transition of power that'll take place this coming Friday on a platform where our President-elect will take the oath of office surrounded by 4 of the 5 living presidents is a testament to our democracy, and I'm incredibly humbled to be a part of it, John.
Last week, before that intelligence briefing, the President-elect said he felt like all these questions were part of a witch hunt. He's now had some new information. There's now the Senate Intelligence Committee. So he no longer thinks this is a witch hunt, this investigation into Russian meddling. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think that there frankly has just been an effort by many in the national media, present company accepted, since this election to essentially demean and question the legitimacy of this incoming administration, and talk of that sources within the intelligence community that have been attributed with sharing that information, public officials, I think is a real disservice to our democracy. As I said, Donald Trump won a landslide election. The American people spoke decisively. They wanted change, and I promise them, come noon this coming Friday, change really begins, and we're going to make America great again.
But there's a distinction between that feeling about the press and legitimate inquiry, as you say, that the Senate Intelligence Committee is doing. Just to button up one question, did any advisor or anybody in the Trump campaign have any contact with the Russians who were trying to meddle in the election?
Oh, of course not. And I think to suggest that is to give credence to some of these bizarre rumors that have swirled around the candidacy, and the fact that a few news organizations, not this one,
right,
actually trafficked in a memo that was produced as opposition research and associated that with intelligence efforts, I think could only be attributed to media bias. And as I said this week at the press conference, John, the American people are tired of it. We're coming into this week with a great sense of optimism. The American people know that we can have government in Washington, D.C. as good as our people. We can get this economy moving again. We can rebuild our military.
Let me move on.
We can be standing tall in the world again. And those are the reasons why Donald Trump's going to take that oath of office on Friday.
Let's move to the world. What does Donald Trump feel about Vladimir Putin and Russia?
Well, I think in the President-elect you have someone who is willing to approach this terrible relationship the United States has with Russia today with fresh eyes, and to at least be open to a better relationship with Vladimir Putin and with Russia. Look, we have some common interests that would be well served if we were able to improve our relationship with Russia, most notably the battle to defeat radical Islamic terrorism and to defeat ISIS at its source. But I think the President-elect also made it clear this week, John, that while a better relationship with Russia would be a good thing, that I think he's realistic about the possibility of that. And I think when you see the cabinet that he's assembled in General Mattis and Senator Coates and Mike Pompeo, we're coming at this with realistic expectations, but the President-elect is determined to re-engage the world on put America first and see if we can make progress for the security and peace of the world.
Let me ask you about that, because the picture that Donald Trump puts forward about his view of Russia seems quite different than the gentleman you mentioned. incoming Secretary of Defense Mattis, and then also Secretary of State Tillerson. Mr. Tillerson said Russia poses a danger. He called Russia an adversary. He said there are a number of areas where America is going to have to confront Russia. That's not an opinion, that's confrontation. Mr. Mattis said the most important thing to recognize is that Putin is trying to break the North Atlantic alliance. My question is, if the American people are listening to Mr. Trump and listening to those men, and more importantly, countries overseas are listening, who's driving the bus? Mr. Trump or those two men?
Well, the great thing about being around Donald Trump is you never have any confusion about who's driving the bus and where the buck stops and who will make the final decision. But I think as you hear the testimony of Rex Tillerson, of General Mattis, of Mike Pompeo, I think the American people will be greatly encouraged by the fact that the President-elect is assembling around him people of extraordinary background and capability who will bring their own experience and their own perspective to inform the President's decisions. But ultimately, the President will make the best decision, the best interest of the American people. And because
on the one hand, you have Mattis and Tillerson saying, confront Russia. Donald Trump doesn't sound like a guy who wants to confront Russia.
Well, you know, if you listen carefully to that press conference this week, and I was standing just alongside of him at the time, that he said it'd be good if we had a better relationship with Russia.
But does he want to say?
He said, I hope it gets better, but he said maybe not.
But does Donald Trump demand that Russia get out of eastern Ukraine? That would be a confrontation that certainly Mattis and Tillerson would. In the context of what they've said, sounds like that what they want. Does Donald Trump want Russians out of eastern Ukraine?
Well, let's be very clear that whether it be eastern Ukraine or Crimea, that the action by the Russians has demonstrated the absence of American leadership over the last 4 to 8 years.
We got new leadership. What's the new leadership want to do?
Well, I think America is going to be more respected in the world the very moment that Donald Trump takes the oath of office as the 45th President of the United States. And he'll work through these issues, John. Okay. I think what the country should be encouraged by is whether it be Rex Tillerson as our Secretary of State, Nikki Haley going to the United Nations, General Mattis, is that he is surrounding himself with a group of men and women that are going to bring the broadest range of experience, inform his decisions, and he'll take the kind of actions and make the kind of decisions that will put America first.
Mr. Tillerson said he hadn't had a conversation about Russia with Donald Trump. How can that be?
Well, I think in the context of these confirmation hearings, the President-elect has made a point to talk to each of the various candidates for these positions, and the nature of those conversations is usually wide-ranging, and so I accept what Rex Tillerson said.
To get Russia in there. I guess the point is, if Donald Trump's driving the bus, shouldn't his Secretary of State know where the bus is going?
I think Rex Tillerson will have and has no confusion about who will be making the decisions in the Trump administration, and that's true of all of us. I mean,
Let me ask you about Mike Flynn.
What's so encouraging to be around Donald Trump and to literally be sitting side by side with him during the course of this transition, when he's done hundreds of interviews and made decisions, attracted men and women of extraordinary caliber to this cabinet. I think we may well have the entire cabinet named before the inauguration, is to see a leader who is decisive. He asks incisive questions. He gets straight to the point. He knows what he's looking for, and when he sees it, he makes the decision.
Let me ask you about, it was reported by David Ignatius that the incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, was in touch with the Russian ambassador on the day the United States government announced sanctions for Russian interference with the election. Did that contact help with that Russian kind of moderate response to it, that there was no counter-reaction from Russia? Did the Flynn conversation help pave the way for that sort of more temperate Russian response?
I talked to General Flynn about that conversation. It actually was initiated when on Christmas Day he had sent a text to the Russian ambassador to express not only Christmas wishes, but sympathy for the loss of life in the airplane crash that took place. It was strictly coincidental that they had a conversation. They did not discuss anything having to do with the United States' decision to expel diplomats or impose a censure against Russia.
So did they ever have a conversation about sanctions ever on those days or any other day?
They did not have a discussion contemporaneous with U.S. action.
But what about ever?
My conversation with General Flynn. Well, look, General Flynn has been in touch with diplomatic leaders and security leaders in some 30 countries. That's exactly what the incoming National Security Advisor should do. But what I can confirm, having spoken to him about it, is that those conversations that happen to occur around the time that the United States took action to expel diplomats had nothing whatsoever to do with those sanctions.
But that still leaves open the possibility that there might have been other conversations about the sanctions.
Yeah, I don't believe there were more conversations.
Let's move on.
But I can confirm that those elements were not part of that discussion.
Congressman John Lewis, who you serve with, Democrat, told on Meet the Press that he did not consider Donald Trump a legitimate president. Your reaction to that?
Well, look, Donald Trump won this election fair and square. 30 out of 50 states, including Georgia. More counties than any Republican candidate since Ronald Reagan. And to hear John Lewis, a man that I served with, that I respect, to question the legitimacy of the election and to say that Donald Trump will not be a legitimate president was deeply disappointing to me. And also to hear that he was not going to attend the inauguration this Friday. I hope he reconsiders both statements. Look, this is a time when we're facing real challenges at home and abroad. And I believe the inauguration ceremony itself and this moment in history would greatly benefit if we set aside these baseless assertions about the legitimacy of the election and we looked for ways to come together, to work together. And the President-elect actually, in a tweet late last night, invited Congressman Lewis to work with us to bring more prosperity, better schools, more safety to our cities around the country.
Let me ask you about a tweet he sent before that tweet, in which he defended himself, famous counterpuncher. Donald Trump said that John Lewis was all talk and no action. I've got a question. He has every right to defend himself. Let me ask you about the wisdom of defending himself. For 5 years, Donald Trump questioned the legitimacy of Barack Obama, said he wasn't born in America, was really the chief advocate of this so-called birther idea. Given that history, given that he's about to be president, why swing at this pitch? Couldn't he have just let it go by, be the bigger man, let John Lewis do his thing, move on? He's about to be president of the United States. As you say, all those challenges, bringing the country together. Why swing at this pitch?
Well, I just, as you said, Donald Trump has every right to defend himself. And to have someone...
But he did challenge the legitimacy of President Obama, so why not
But
just
to
let
have
it go?
someone like John Lewis, who, look, I served with John. I disagreed with him on most issues, but I had tremendous respect for him. And my family and I walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with him on the 65th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. We honor the sacrifice that he made, but part of the result of what happened on Bloody Sunday and the courage that he showed was the Voting Rights Act. And so for someone of his stature, not just in the civil rights movement, but in voting rights, to make a comment that he did not consider Donald Trump to be a legitimate president, I think is deeply disappointing. Look, I attended both of Barack Obama's inaugurations, one as a congressman and one as a governor, because I believe inaugurations are a moment when we should come together around that individual who has been elected to be President of the United States of America. Donald Trump said it on election night, John, that he's determined to be president of all of the people of this country. And I do hope that John Lewis will reconsider his statement, but also will reconsider attending the inauguration. Will join us so that we can come together to take on the intractable problems that have been facing Americans, particularly too many families in our inner cities that are beset by unsafe streets, failing schools, and the lack of jobs and opportunities.
One final question. Esquire has a report that the Trump administration is thinking of moving the press out of the White House. Is that a logistical move or a punitive move?
I think no decision's been made on that yet. As you know, having been in this town a lot longer than me, the White House is actually 18 acres, and I think what the team told me is there's such a tremendous amount of interest in this incoming administration that they're giving some consideration to finding a larger venue on the 18 acres in the White House complex to accommodate the extraordinary interest. The White House press room, which you've served in, John, is actually it's a pretty small room, and I think the interest of the team is to make sure that we accommodate the broadest number of people who are interested in media from around the country and around the world. But we're working that out in a way that'll reflect our commitment to transparency, to a free and independent press, and we look forward to those days.
If you get rid of the press briefing room, you can create more room for the daily press guys who have to be there every day. So you got more room there for more of them.
I'll pass that along.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President-elect. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
And we'll be back in 1 minute with Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. Stay with us.